Good evening, YouTube, and welcome. For tonight's stream, the song that I've been working on, I've done several streams for it now. A lot of it was the recording process. I did a little bit of mixing and mastering, and now I'm ready to finish that process up. I want to get this track released. Really like how it turned out. So tonight I'm doing just a couple of final tweaks and edits, and then taking a look at the mix, which is going to be pretty minimalist, and then I will do my mastering process and hopefully get it ready for release to all of the digital stores. So without further ado, let's get going here. So first off, you can see up here in the corner, I've got Logic running, not that corner, this corner, there you go, cool. Mirror image. Got Logic running, and I've got everything that I've kind of done in the project so far pulled up. So I'm going to play through it so you can hear again the entirety of the piece, get familiar with it, and then we'll dive into the edits. So here is a playthrough, Dance of the Evergreens in our current state. Okay, so Dance of the Evergreens, there it is. All right, so I got pretty far. I'm mostly happy with the mix. Sorry, I'm still getting over a little bit of sickness, so sorry for the coughing and stuff like that. Couple things that I missed. I think I forgot to put the lead from the verses. Here we go, this part. So these leads right here, so as I listen, I think it adds a little bit. At first I wasn't sure, but I think it does add something, and it kind of feels empty without it now in the second verse. Or, you know what? I wonder, so how about this? Let's try this. So I'm thinking, let's do these first lead parts. Haha, just kidding, marquee tool. Let's move these over here. And then let's make a copy of these. Just kidding, a copy of these and put them over here and see what that does. So now we've got a little added momentum in the second verse. So let's see what that sounds like. See, I kind of like that. It's like a little energy boost when the lead picks up here. So it's really chill and mellow at first. And then there's like this steady emotional build up. That's cool. So, right, so the second verse then now has this additional lead part, so it's not quite as, it's a little more, maintains the energy a bit. Cool, yes, me like. All right, now the next thing was that I think I had some metronome bleed, which is a big ol' no-no in this part. All right, so let's see, what track is that? Where is the bleed? Yep, that's it. So I'm gonna have to kill that. You can hear it really subtly. You may not be able to hear it like, I don't know, over the stream, but there's really, I can hear the click. So I forgot to turn off my headphones. And so I had a bunch of open headphones that were running during that part. So yeah, that's what happened. So I'm gonna fade. Classic mistake. Okay, and let's make sure it gets out by the end there. Okay, it sounds like I also had it in the shaker. I was just moving too fast. I got inspired, you know, and I was just recording and yeah. That track's a culprit too. Okay, let's zoom in a bit. I don't want to kill the transient. What do we got here? Nope, that's not what I want. Okay, here, flex time, go away for a second. Okay. Alright, so there's the click. Did I do anything meaningful here? Okay, so that first transient, that works for me. And then we'll kind of do a little light fade into the transient there. Cool. I like the way that fades out towards the end. Okay, so another thing that I did on this track was like a hands and feet thing. So I actually tapped, like total obnoxious like kid in the store, you know, that's a drummer that just can't stay still. I did that, and I actually kind of like the way it sounded. It's got this really neat, warm, thuddy kind of percussion, so here it is. So let's add some meat to this. Yeah, I think I had that. Let's see what I'm automating that to. Dynamic mode. It's not actually set to anything. Okay, so here's a good tool. So I'm using Neutron. Sorry. Using Neutron, and it's a great tool. And so one of the things you can do is automate the EQ. And I'm gonna bring my dogs back inside, hold on. Come on, Pooch Pups. Yay, Pooch Pups. Alright, there you go. Bye, dogs. Have a good one. Sweet. Okay, dog's back inside, crisis averted. Okay, we're good. So, there's a dynamic EQ mode. So this cut here that I've got at 2 kilohertz, that only actually happens if you cross some criteria based on this dynamic mode. So right now there's a threshold, just like a compressor, and I think it's just reacting to the content at that band. But what I wanted to do was actually sidechain it to, I think maybe the Darbuka track. because that's in that range. So I wanted to sidechain it to the darbuka. So I'm going to do external full band. So I want it to respond to that to allow a little bit of space for it. So now you can see, and I'll solo the darbuka too, what's happening here is that it's no longer dipping this band based on the content coming from the track itself. It's now listening to the darbuka. And so anything that comes through there, it only dips that band when darbuka content comes through. Very handy way of mixing and kind of getting stuff out of the way. If you only need it to happen to clear room for something else, right? So if the intent is to clear space for something else, then if that something else isn't playing, no need to permanently cut. So this is a wonderful tool for that. And now you can kind of even see whenever that darbuka comes through, that's when it's responding most. I think maybe that cut's a little bit too extreme, and I think I'd actually like to give it a little bit of beef. A little bit of beef, because there's not a whole lot in there because I recorded from a distance anyway, but yeah, just a little bit of thud when my feet hit the floor there. There you go. I like that. Nice and thick. Alright, so now let's put it together, see how it sounds. So I really wanted like a tight, percussive, you know, like polyrhythmic kind of groove going here. Cool. Alright, I like it. I'm going to do another listen through, because again, I'm at the point in mixing now where it's just big picture stuff. So I really don't want to get in and get super surgical. Like, there's not a lot that it needs, right? The whole goal of this track is to be simple. Well, no, that's not true. The whole goal of this track is to breathe, to have some space. Like, it's not necessarily a simple arrangement, although I don't want you to feel... I don't want the listener to feel like it's complicated. I want to feel like they can groove. But for anybody who like peeks in and pays attention, you know, I want you to also be interested. But overall, from a mix perspective, I don't want it super, you know, like busy and automated. I want it to have this really like chill vibe throughout the whole thing. All right, so I'm gonna do one more kind of big picture listen across the whole arrangement, and let's see how it goes. Oh yeah, fun fact there. So that little section that you just saw that automated, so here's what happened. I double tracked in stereo, right? I stereo double tracked the rhythm ukulele part. I thought I had everything kind of like done, and there was this one little section on bar 6 where as soon as everything comes in, it kept sounding like it was rushing or being skipped or something, and it was driving me insane. Couldn't find it. And I'm like, and so I wanted just a single track so that when it hits that bar, that it sounds really big and full. Couldn't figure it out. Finally, I muted that track and I was like, I wonder if it's just the take. And so then I listened to the second one and sure enough, it fixed it. But in this take, even though it's good, there's a rhythmic problem earlier and that was fine in the previous one. So I just automated between the two of them. So if you're really paying attention, you can hear it, but hopefully like it doesn't jump out at you. But here's one more time. You'll see it right here in the gray. Watch the automation. Okay, so in headphones, the shaker's a little prominent through this section. Let me check it without. Yeah, no, it's still pretty, a little bit too hot. All right, so here's what I'm gonna do. I think I can probably pick up through, let's see. So I kind of like that it has a little more intensity there starting at bar 22, but it's a little hot for everything else. So I'm going to do marquee tool, and let's bring the volume automation just for that section down. Let's try that. It could stand a little more actually. Let's see here. Okay, so I think that was better. And now from here, I like it coming up a little bit, but not that much. So maybe split the difference. All right, so see, So there's no shaker in the second verse. And I bet it probably works. I'm gonna... Yeah, I like that. It's a little more focused actually. Let's try it. Let's try it gone from the first verse and just see. Mixed decisions, right? I like the polyrhythm. So I think why it works now that I'm thinking about it, I'm okay, I'm gonna leave it. So I'm gonna leave the shaker in this one. I'm not gonna copy it to the second one. And the reason why is because I added the leads into the second one, right? So that covers for the difference in energy. By the way, something I was just so excited about, and I did this on a whim, thinking like, whatever, if it works, it works. And I loved how it turned out. Like, I really love in this section when you hear this. So this is me on acoustic guitar, slapping the string muted, and then hitting the body. So I think I'm slapping it with my right hand, and then hitting the body with my left hand. Check this out. And then later on in this section, in fact, see, look at that. I haven't even given this beef yet. All right, let's do it. Isn't that awesome though? Like, that's an acoustic guitar. And technically it's a nylon string guitar at that. Like, not even like a full acoustic, but like just a really pleasing, almost snare-like sound to it. And that's just slapping the sixth string. And I did it, just kind of messing around, thinking like, yeah, whatever, I'll just delete this later. And then it like sounds awesome. I really love the way it turned out. And it's very percussive and like got this neat texture where you can't quite, like if you're not hearing it soloed, when you hear it in the mix, it's like, what is that percussion? So let's talk about that mixed decision just now. Okay, so if you saw, I added a neutron. I wanted to boost up the beef of the little like hit, the fist hit on the body of the guitar, and then get some more crack in the, the snare sound, right? And then when I did that, you'll probably noticed over there that I started clipping. It was like 4.6 in the red. And I heard it pretty clearly in my headphones. It was a bass. It was the like bass frequencies, a little bit of rumble coming through on the microphone that was clipping. So what I did was I reduced down like the sub kind of content there, just enough to get rid of that clipping. So a lot of times bass frequencies will do that. And by just dipping them down a little bit, you can get rid of the clipping on the track, because it's not all frequencies that are making it clip. And that's why I don't really like meters, other than just as a really quick reference, like it's not super useful for me to just see that something across the entire frequency spectrum clipped by 4 dB. It's just not super helpful. So I'd rather look at it from an EQ perspective and see exactly where it was. And now watch, I'm gonna play it again, and notice over here on the left side of the screen, for Logic, it doesn't clip anymore. I just took off enough bass frequency where it's not clipping. Oh, spoke too soon. All right, so it's still clipping a little bit. Let's bring this down just a touch. Okay, so we got a couple transients. Not as bad, not as often. So again, mixed decisions, right? So I spoke a little too soon. So it's not just bass frequencies that we're clipping, but that did take care of a lot of them. It wasn't as often. So then the next step for me is I'm using a compressor to take care of the rest of the peak. So when I first came over here, you saw it was on RMS, root mean square, which is more of a gentle compression that averages over time. I actually wanted to reach out and grab the no kidding transients that are coming through. And then I'm bringing down the threshold slowly because I want it to touch the threshold in enough time. And pretty quick attack, I wanted to squash it, but then release pretty quickly too. And so we'll see how that now affects the sound. So I wanted to reach out and just gently touch the transient so it's not... Good, much better. Okay, so we got one transient there that went over. Oh yeah, and I see it in the waveform even, so I'm okay with that. You know, I'm not trying to totally reduce it. As long as it's not clipping the master output, I'm fine with it. And in the headphones, it's this really nice, rich, beefy kind of bass tone, so I'm okay with that. I'll leave it. I didn't want it clipping all over the place, but that one hit is what does it. And it still crunches it pretty good there. Really enjoy how the acoustic bass turned out on this. So I recorded it stereo through some Rode NT55 small diaphragm condensers, which, when you think about it, right, acoustic bass with a small diaphragm, why? Well, and the reason why is because I wanted to emphasize, I wanted to give it kind of this really neat organic quality to it. So if you listen, here's just the recorded, the mic'd part. So you can hear it's a lot more pick noise and string noise and stuff like that. So I didn't need a lot of deep bass because the DI sounds like this. Right, so I've got DI kind of covering that low end. I wanted some of the detail blended together. So here's what they sound like together. So it's stereo mic'd XY configuration centered near the 12th fret, and then DI recorded all together, single take for these 3 tracks. Really cool, thick, rich sound with a lot of, you know, interesting content to it, almost like a chorusy effect, you know, kind of because the difference in timing between the 2 microphones. Because I don't have a real tight XY, I've got a wide XY. It's probably 120-ish degrees. So, and in the mix, it just sounds really cool. It's got this neat effect that I think it adds to the, especially with ukuleles being so high, like it's such a spread, you know. Okay, so on this book region, let's see here. I think, yes. Okay, so I accidentally covered up some of the other tracks, so good. Clean that up. Cool. Okay, so one more thing I thought of. So I really like, and I think I did this on accident, I like the lead line in that little section. Let me hear where it's at exactly. Okay. Let's see which one actually has the accurate one. I heard a little mistake in there. So. Okay, so I'd like to emphasize that I do like the dynamics, but it's a little bit too much. So let's... So I think if I start it right there on bar 86 and kind of bump it up a little bit. Good. Just enough. Just enough where you can kind of, you know, actively hear it a little bit more. Cool. All right, I don't think I heard anything else major that I want to adjust. So I'm gonna just do one more quick run through here. Sections. Yeah, that thicker kind of bass adjustment on the acoustic. Sounds good. Cool, I like it. Okay, so at this point, you kind of just watch what I'm doing. This is how I help myself get to a place where I realize that it's done. When I start doing this, exactly what I'm doing, where I'm just kind of listening, you know, and I'm sort of going, nah, maybe a little bit of this, maybe a little bit of that. And like for the most part, when I listen through, I'm not noticing anything glaring that like needs to be fixed. That's the point where I try to catch myself as soon as I realize that I'm doing a little bit of that and saying, all right, cool, then it's good. You know, like if I don't hear anything that needs to be fixed and I'm just sort of, you know, just kind of meh, a little bit of this, a little bump there, and nothing much else is happening, I cut it off and I say, all right, done, good to go. That way I don't meander and just languish, you know, trying all these little things, because you start losing the vision, right? You start losing where you're going. And usually this point where you're just sort of like listening and thinking, that's probably a great place to cut it off, assuming you've kind of done everything that you need to do to fix it. Not what you want to do, what you need to do. So I am at that point and I'm gonna call it and we're gonna do a bounce. Now before I before I got on stream, let me show you real quick, because I actually did do a little bit of mastering kind of before I got on stream. And I'll say this as well. I'm at the point where I've mastered enough of like other people's projects and my own projects, and I know why you make certain mastering decisions, and so I'm okay with a pre-canned mastering chain. Now, I hesitate to say that because for a lot of people, I think there's this period for a lot of people when they get into recording and they start becoming like a decently strong mix engineer. You know, like they start really getting a good understanding of compression, good understanding of EQ, good understanding of tasteful reverb, balance, you know, and they're not doing these like crazy decisions. They're really starting to get a good sense of like what sounds good in a mix. I think there's this kind of this gray period where if you don't work on other people's projects as a mastering engineer, it's like there's this nebulous, you know, like, well, what? I'll just throw an EQ and some compression on the mastering bus and call it good, you know, and that's mastering. And that, you know, is that incorrect? No, it's not incorrect. If it sounds good and you're hitting the levels that you want, is it ultimately incorrect? Not at all. No, go for it. But I do think it's important to learn, and I think you can only really get a good perspective of this when you start doing it with other people's material. I think it's a good idea to learn why you would make mastering choices that you make. And when you get a chance to separate it into a totally separate phase where you are not involved with the mix and you're just getting stems or a stereo stem, and then you have to master from there, like how do I make this already decent sounding mix sound better? And sound polished and sound like it should fit in with the rest of a project. That, I think, clarifies, you know, the reasons why you would do things. So a lot of mastering has to do with project-oriented criteria, right? So for real mastering projects, and I think one of the things that separates it as a separate discipline from mixing is when it's fitting in together with an album or a larger project, and you are authoring and setting levels for a delivery platform and delivery specifications. And that's where I think the science part of mastering comes in, and that's a pretty, pretty straightforward, I think, thing that you can look at and measure that you don't necessarily have to do on like self-produced projects where you're just putting out a track at a time kind of thing. But even still, broad principles apply. So in general, when you look at mastering, you're looking at what overall on the entire mix does this track need in order to benefit it? What EQ decisions would help the entire track to kind of have a little bit of a lift? What dynamics and compression settings, you know, overall, the overarching dynamic arc of the track, what would help it? And so once you get a feel for that and you learn how to make those mix decisions with plugins in a subtle way that does enhance it, and especially when you're self-producing, I do think that there's like a common chain that you can get to where you go in and just tweak settings once you've found things that you know generally work for you. Like, so for me, right, I'm always using the same mics. I'm always using the same sets of instruments that I've got a lot of experience with and I record with them all the time. I'm using many of the same sample libraries and stuff like that. So I'm using the same DAW, same plugins. And so you get very familiar with what sounds good with the setup and the room and the recording techniques that you have. So that's where I think it's important. When I get somebody else's project, I really make it a point to bring it into an Ozone project away from Logic and listen to it with fresh ears, you know, and kind of approach it manually, where I will manually build my mastering chain. So hopefully that helps you a little bit. Decisions that I've made here on EQ, just a little bit of low end bump, a little bit of kind of a 2K centered boost, and then very slight sparkle in the upper end. Really subtle curve here, nothing crazy going on. Dynamics, it's 2 bands, and I like the learn feature on Ozone. I don't think it's cheating, and all the people who try to tell you otherwise, use the tools that you have. You don't get bonus points for not using the tools that are at your disposal. So if you've got Ozone and you've got, you know, some mastering assistant tool that's going to get you in the ballpark, use it. Go for it. It's not cheating. It's not any of that other nonsense. Like, the only and I wouldn't even say cheating. The only time that it's perhaps not a good decision is if you have no idea why it's doing that and you're just gonna roll with it. Like you say, mastering assistant, go, okay, sweet, I guess it knows what it's doing. You know, I still go in and I tweak and I look at that. It's probably pretty close, but I'm still gonna go in and listen, adjust it a little bit, see how the adjustment affects it and what it did. Why did it make that decision and do I agree with it? So I think that's really important. So in this case, since it's just a 2-band EQ, high end and low end, it pretty much split the difference right down the middle. And it's a blended parallel compressor, right? So 50% wet, 50% dry. The limiter is set to pretty hard standings, but it's a 0 dB, so this is essentially a safety limiter at this point. And then on the compressor, it's at 12 dB, but super gentle, 1.5 ratio with a fairly gentle attack and quicker release. So I mean, subtle stuff like that. Dynamic EQ. So this was in a couple of problem bands that I went through. So this was part of its automated master assistant decision, but I don't mind because these are generally mud frequencies, and so it's set to, if those frequencies get above this threshold, then it's going to bring them down significantly just to reduce mud. So I'm okay with that, since they're dynamic especially. And it's a minus 16 dB, not too bad. 8 millisecond attack, pretty quick, and then 14 millisecond release. So, these are going to be real quick, transient-based changes just to prevent mud, and I'm okay with that. And then maximizer. So I'm using the IRC4 algorithm based on transients, and I wanted a threshold of minus 14 LUFS, which is, pretty standard. Some people disagree, but I shoot for LUFS targets. I think it's easy to measure. It's a good method of measuring based on the human ear, and so that's what I went with for a mastering chain there. So that was it for that. All right, so now I'm ready to bounce, and I'm going to bounce my final master V2, like the joke that everybody says, your final, real final, true, dot wave. So I'm using the new version of Logic I updated, and we're gonna do a little test here. So let me cancel this for a second. So normally what I did was I just select all and hit bounce, because then it will automatically pick the ending point of your very last region as the cutoff point. So bar 93 in this case, looks like. But when I'm doing it right now, so it does accurately select bar 93, which is great. But whenever I bounce, and we'll see if it does it this time around, I'm actually finding that it's adding like 15 seconds of silence to the end of it. So I'm not sure what's going on with that, but I don't like it. Fix your bugs, Apple. All right, original media, audio files, cool, music library, yes, mastered tracks, published. Dance of the Evergreens, master.wave, bounce. Okay, and the track is bouncing. The intent for this is I'm going to be releasing this as a single, so I'm going to do, I still need to do album art for it, but I'm going to be releasing this as a single up on Spotify, iTunes, Bandcamp, etc. So I really hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for sticking with me for all these sessions. I'm going to make a playlist for all the live streams and label them accordingly, so that if you'd like to go back and kind of see how this song came together from start to finish, you can watch all the streams. And I got a good percentage of the song captured live, the process that is. I did a couple things offline, but I got a good portion of it where you can kind of see it from start to finish. So thank you very much for joining me tonight. I'm going to be streaming again probably next week a little bit. And yeah, look for it probably in about 2 weeks up on Spotify and iTunes. Dance of the Evergreens. Thanks.